2,000 years ago, in the dead of a European winter, a Roman senator could walk barefoot across his stone floor and feel warmth rising through the soles of his feet. No fireplace in the room, no furnace humming in the basement, no pipes running up the walls, no electricity, because electricity would not be harnessed for heating for another 19 centuries. Just warm stone in the middle of winter, in a building with snow on the roof. And here is the part that should stop you. We do not really build like that anymore. The Romans solved heated floors before the fall of their empire. The technique worked beautifully for centuries, and then it was almost completely forgotten. What replaced it costs thousands of pounds to install and burns money every month it runs. So how did an ancient civilization heat entire buildings, floors, and walls and all with nothing but fire and clever design? And why on earth did we abandon something that good? That is what I want to show you, because once you understand how this actually worked, you will start to wonder how much practical genius we have thrown away in the name of progress. Let me set the scene properly, because the scale of this is genuinely hard to believe. The Romans didn't just warm a single room, they heated entire bath complexes, buildings big enough to hold thousands of people, keeping the floors and walls hot enough that visitors wore wooden sandals so they wouldn't burn their feet on the tiles. They did this reliably across the whole empire, from the deserts of North Africa to the freezing frontier forts of northern Britain. Soldiers stationed on Hadrian's Wall, in some of the coldest, wettest conditions the empire had to offer, sat in warm rooms heated by this exact system. That's not a luxury for emperors. That was standard Roman engineering. Quick question while we're here, and genuinely drop your answer below, because I read the comments and they shape what I make next. Have you ever lived somewhere with a cold floor that no amount of heating ever seemed to fix? That freezing tile in the bathroom, the kitchen floor that's like ice every morning? Tell me in the comments, because the Romans would have looked at that problem and laughed at how easily they'd already solved it. The system is called a hypocaust. The word comes from Greek and means burning underneath, and that name tells you almost everything about how it worked. The Romans built their floors raised up off the ground, suspended on a forest of short brick or stone pillars called pilae. These little columns, usually about 2 feet tall, held up the floor and left a hollow open space underneath the entire room. Picture a stone floor floating on hundreds of small brick stacks, with an empty void beneath the whole thing. Then at one side of the building, they built a furnace. A slave or servant would keep a fire burning in it constantly, and that is the first piece of how this works. The hot air and smoke from that fire did not go up a chimney. Instead, it was channeled sideways and drawn into that hollow space beneath the raised floor. The heat spread out through the void, flowing around all those little pillars, and warmed the underside of the stone floor from below. So the floor itself became a giant radiator. Stone holds heat extraordinarily well, so once those tiles were warm, they stayed warm, radiating gentle heat up into the room for hours. That alone would be clever. But the Romans took it further, and this is the part that turns a neat trick into genuine engineering. They did not let that hot air just sit under the floor and cool down. They built hollow spaces into the walls too. Special box-shaped clay tiles called tubuli were stacked inside the walls, creating vertical channels like chimneys hidden inside the brickwork. The hot air that had warmed the floor was then drawn upward through those wall channels, heating the walls on its way out before finally escaping through vents near the roof. Think about what that means for a second. The heat from a single fire was not used once and thrown away. It was made to travel, first under the entire floor, then up through every wall, warming surface after surface before it ever left the building. One fire heating the floor, then the walls, then venting out only after it had given up nearly all its warmth to the stone. That is staggeringly efficient for something built before anyone understood thermodynamics as a science. They worked it out by observation, trial, and an instinct for how heat behaves. If your brain just did that little click of understanding, where you suddenly see how the whole thing fits together, do me a favor and tap the like button. It genuinely tells the algorithm that this kind of forgotten engineering deserves to be shown to more people. And honestly, that is the only way a smaller channel like this one keeps growing. One tap, and it makes a real difference on my end. Now, the genius of the hypocaust wasn't just the heat, it was the comfort. Modern heating tends to warm the air, which rises straight to the ceiling and leaves your feet cold, which is exactly backwards from what a human body actually wants. We feel most comfortable when our feet are warm and our heads are cool. The hypocaust delivered precisely that. The warmth came from below, from the floor and the lower walls, radiating gently upward. It didn't blast hot air around or dry out the room. It was a soft, even radiant warmth rising from the ground, which is the single most comfortable way a human being can be heated. The Romans stumbled onto the ideal heating system, and they did it with fire and hollow stone, and it spread everywhere they went. Archaeologists have uncovered hypocaust systems in Roman ruins from Turkey to Portugal, from the Sahara's edge to the north of England. One of the best preserved examples sits at the Roman baths in Bath in England, where you can still walk down and see the original pillars standing in their rows beneath where the floor once was, the empty heating void laid bare after 2,000 years. At Chedworth Roman Villa, also in England, archaeologists found the system so intact you can trace exactly how the hot air would have traveled from the furnace, under the floor, and up through the walls. These aren't fragile ruins that barely survived. The heating systems were built so solidly, so much a part of the structure, that they've outlasted the empire that built them by 2 millennia. Stand in one of those excavated rooms and the truth is obvious. This wasn't crude. It was precision engineering in stone. Wherever the Romans built something that mattered, a bathhouse, a villa, a fort, they built warmth into the very bones of the structure. The heating was not a machine you added to a building, it was the building. The floor, the walls, the architecture itself was the heating system. There was nothing to break down, nothing to replace, nothing that became obsolete. As long as someone fed the fire, the stone stayed warm. So if it was this good, this comfortable, this efficient, the obvious question is the one you are already asking. What happened? Why did we stop building this way? Why does a luxury new build today still leave you standing on a freezing floor in January? The honest answer is a mix of collapse and convenience, and it is more frustrating than dramatic. When the Roman Empire fell apart in the West, an enormous amount of practical knowledge fell with it. The hypocaust needed skilled builders to construct it correctly, a steady supply of fuel, and someone to tend the fire. In the chaos and poverty of the centuries that followed, most of Europe simply could not sustain that. The knowledge did not get banned or hidden. It was abandoned because the society that could afford it had broken down. People went back to open hearths and single fires in single rooms, and the idea of heating a whole building through its floors and walls became a lost art for over 1,000 years. And when heating technology finally advanced again, it advanced in a completely different direction. The industrial age gave us boilers, radiators, and eventually forced air systems and central heating. These had one enormous advantage that had nothing to do with comfort or efficiency. They could be manufactured, sold, installed, serviced, and replaced. A hypocaust is built once into the structure and lasts as long as the building stands. A modern heating system is a product with parts that wear out, units that need replacing every 10 or 15 years, and engineers who come out to fix it. One of those models makes ongoing money, the other does not. Guess which one the modern building industry was built around? That is not a conspiracy. It is just the quiet logic of how industries grow. We did not choose forced air heating because it was better. We chose it because it fit a business model, and because by the time we had the technology to revive radiant heating properly, we had already built entire industries, supply chains, and habits around the alternative. But here is the genuinely good news, and the reason this isn't just a history lesson. The Roman principle never stopped working, and it's quietly coming back. Modern underfloor heating, the kind you'll find in high-end homes and increasingly in eco-builds, is a direct descendant of the hypocaust. Instead of a fire in a hollow space, it runs warm water through pipes or electric elements beneath the floor, but the principle is identical. Heat the floor, let the warmth rise gently and evenly, and you get that same barefoot comfortable, head cool, feet warm sensation the Romans enjoyed 2,000 years ago. The people building the most comfortable, efficient homes today are, knowingly or not, copying Roman engineers. You can lean into this principle even without a full system. Thermal mass is the real secret, the same idea that made those stone floors hold heat for hours. A solid floor that's allowed to absorb warmth during the day, from sunlight, through a window or a low background heat source, will release that warmth slowly into the evening, exactly when you want it. Build with heavy, dense materials, let them soak up heat, and let them give it back slowly. That's the lesson under the lesson. The Romans understood that the most comfortable warmth doesn't come from blasting hot air at you. It comes from warm surfaces radiating gently from the ground up. There are simpler, cheaper ways to borrow this too. A dark stone or tiled floor near a sunny window acts as a small hypocaust of its own, soaking up the sun all day and releasing it after dark. A heavy stone hearth, a thick masonry wall, even a well-placed slab of dense flooring will all hold and release heat far better than the thin, lightweight materials most modern homes are built from. That's part of why a centuries-old stone cottage often feels more naturally stable in temperature than a brand new build. The old structures had mass, and mass is a battery for warmth. If you're ever in a position to choose flooring or building materials, choosing heavy and dense over thin and light is the single easiest way to put a piece of Roman thinking back into a modern home, with no fire, no furnace, and no monthly bill attached. Think about what that really tells us. We tend to assume that newer always means better, that an ancient civilization surely couldn't teach us anything about how to heat our homes. But the Romans had cracked the most comfortable heating method humanly possible, and we spent 1,000 years forgetting it, then 100 more years selling ourselves something less comfortable because it came with a maintenance contract. The physics didn't change, we just stopped paying attention to it. So here's where I'll leave you. And I want to ask you two quick things before you go. First, if you found this genuinely interesting, subscribe. Because I'm working through a whole series on the forgotten engineering and lost techniques that quietly beat the expensive modern stuff, and this is only getting better. Second, drop a comment and tell me honestly, would you want a Roman-style heated floor in your own home? Or do you think we're better off with what we've got now? I genuinely want to know where you land because your answers steer what I dig into next. And speaking of heat from unexpected places, the next one might be the strangest of all. There is a man in the south of France who heated his entire home and even ran hot water in a vehicle using nothing but a giant pile of rotting wood chips. No fire, no fuel bill, just decomposition and some genuinely clever plumbing. I'll show you exactly how he did it and whether you could actually do it yourself. See you in that one.